Hello, everybody. I'm Josh Welsh, president of Film Independent, and welcome to a very special edition of Film Independent Presents. It is our huge honor and pleasure to have Ondi Timoner here to talk about Mapplethorpe, the director's cut. Before we dive in, let me just do a couple quick thanks. Thank you to the HFPA and to Vision Media for your support on our year-round screening program. Without you, we would not be here, so thank you so much. And thank you also to Samuel Goldwyn Films. Really, really appreciated. Ondi, so good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor. It's a really exciting moment to be able to share the director's cut with the world finally. So
I'm really excited to talk to you about this. You know, I was thinking about this, you know, director's cuts. I mean, I can't think of a lot of independent films where there are director's cuts. There's like, you know, of course there's, you know, Coppola's done some on like, you know, The Godfather, things like that, or there's the endless recuts of Apocalypse Now. But I'm really excited to talk to you about how you revisited this film and how, you know, what your creative process was in that. But maybe before we get started, I think anyone watching this knows who Ondi is, but just in case you're new, Ondi is an amazingly talented filmmaker of both documentary and narrative fiction film. Perhaps best known for documentaries like Dig, We Live in Public, Brand, A Second Coming, and her new film Coming Clean, which maybe we can talk a little bit about at the end. But Mapplethorpe was your first narrative fiction feature. And I'd love to just back up before we talk about the recut. Maybe could you talk just about Mapplethorpe, your original impetus to do the film? I know it was something you worked on for a long time in terms of the writing and getting it set up. What was the origin of the project? What drew you to want to make a Mapplethorpe film, and why did you approach it as fiction as opposed to documentary?
well, thanks, Josh. It is actually, as you say that, I was thinking, wow, it was a really, really long gestation period. And probably knowing you for as many years as I have, I probably mentioned it numerous times, like, yeah, well, I'm making Mapplethorpe, you know, but essentially the journey started in 2006, where I was actually approached by a wonderful production designer named Bruce Goodrich, who had written a script about Mapplethorpe from the perspective of the courtroom and what happened with The Perfect Moment and the controversy around that in 1989 and 90 after Robert's death. And I found that was my entryway into the story of Robert. I hadn't really focused on it. I realized that I did have a calendar of his flowers when I was like 10, and little did I know about the other side of his work back then. But I loved his aesthetic. And in reading that and talking with Bruce, who asked me if I would produce and direct it, we decided to kind of develop the story some more. And I was lucky enough to win Sundance for the second time in 2009 for We Live in Public. And they contacted me and said, do you have any scripted film you're working on? Your narrative style's pretty awesome in nonfiction. We'd love to see what you can do. And I sent them his script of Mapplethorpe. And they ended up inviting me to the director's lab. And that was a very important moment for the film's development in 2010. I really believe there's nothing greater. I personally had not gone to film school, and being at the Sundance Labs I can't imagine a film school could have been better than that. You know, I mean, I literally had Ed Harris standing next to me on set, whispering in my ear what to say to the actor. And in cutting those 4 scenes and having these critiques with Bob Redford himself and Leslie Linkaglatter and just a number of incredible mentors, Michael Hoffman, who made The Last Station, Joan Darling, the great Joan Darling, you know, taught me to act in that summer. By the end of it, they said, you know, really good news, you're ready to direct a scripted film, but you need to make a new script and you should write it. You should do the rewrite. And I said, what makes you think that I can do that, you know? And they said, because of your other films and the way you know this character, you understand this character. And so I contacted the Mapplethorpe Foundation and you know, talked to my producing partners to get their blessing. And the foundation was really supportive of it and ended up sending me like 50 books and really early works and all of this stuff. And I just sat surrounded by these books and pouring through these books. for some months and rewrote between the director's lab, I guess, September and December. In that time, my movie Cool It about climate change was coming out. I was at the Hamptons. I approached James Franco then about starring as Robert Mapplethorpe. Kind of approached him. He kind of approached me about it. It was a weird, and it's actually, the Hamptons have it somewhere in their archives because it's on camera. It was a crazy story, which I'll tell you if you want, but not to digress too much. He contacted me right after Christmas, having read my rewrite, and said I'd love to play the role. And so he was essentially part of the journey for the next few years. And there were a lot of rewrites, and we got to the altar a few times with financiers, but for one reason or another, things didn't work out. And it really showed me, I'm sorry, my husky is having a little bit of a freak out behind me. So if you hear weird sounds, that's what it is. But yeah, I mean, essentially, like I had an experience of what it is to make an independent film, especially about probably the most controversial artist in the world. And it was really, really difficult to finally get the funding together. And then James left the project, and before The Crown or anything, we found Matt Smith, and his reading, he read actually for me, was jaw-dropping. It was just, oh my God, this is Mapplethorpe. Like he has the gravitas to play this role. And that was a crucial addition. But again, he at that point wasn't really financeable. It was more about, this is the right person. Now let's figure out how to make this movie. And we kind of went from there, and it finally got the funding in 2017, like 10 days before I was losing the rights, which they had extended for a decade, the Mapplethorpe Foundation. So when you see the photographs in the film and you see the sketches, even the early drawings, that's all, courtesy of the Robert Mapplethorpe Foundation. Those are originals or original reprints.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, Matt Smith, I mean, the cast is fantastic, but really Matt Smith is, I thought it was a beautiful performance, and it captures like the kind of youthful, I don't know if innocence is the right word, but those early scenes with Patti Smith, when you get that sense of how young they were, but then his transition where he's got such authority and commanding presence, and just commitment to what he wants to do, that like there's a nuance to his performance that is really pretty amazing.
Yeah, he really had the edge that I wanted. This is a really dark figure in a lot of ways. I mean, he had an incredible levity to him as a character, but my drive to tell the story of Mapplethorpe really came from wanting to make an anthem for artists, really feeling like if I could tell this coming of age story, and that's what I turned it into. In the rewrite, it went from courtroom and posthumous look at Mapplethorpe to really an unfolding dramatic tale of a boy who grows up in the Catholic Church as an altar boy, who loves the church for reasons that we all find beautiful. I think the rituals and the iconography is sexual. It is innately gorgeous and kind of gory and kind of, Christ is on a cross, and it's just like, and Mapplethorpe's aesthetic would not exist without the Catholic Church, so I really wanted to take it from like early through Patti Smith, which was a super important relationship for him, whereby he was at the same time taking Polaroids and really discovering who he was as an artist. And that led to him discovering his sexuality. There was just no way to really tell the story of Robert Mapplethorpe without telling the story of the church and the story of Patti and him, which was also an issue at certain points, because she wasn't necessarily, on board with us telling this story at all. Not on board with the documentary that was made about him by Fenton and Randy, or on board with this all those years. So, and those are, she has her reasons, I suppose. I never really got a clear answer on that, but I knew that when my partner suggested taking her out of the story, that was going to be impossible, because, this was the relationship of his life. Like, he was absolutely, going to spend his life with this woman. And it was because it's almost like Chase having a tiger by its tail. That camera led him into worlds he found fascinating. And I related on that level as a doc filmmaker. My camera through my life has led me into worlds that I find utterly fascinating. And And so that was kind of a big connection between me and Robert. And it led to him having to leave his partner, leave Patty and go into a more lonely life in a lot of ways. And not because being gay is lonely, but back then it was the harder road to choose, and that's the other thing, to realize historically what he did to bring, LGBTQ life to the mainstream, that his goal was to take this underworld that we found so obscene and make it and put it in the Met. That kind of ambitious goal, first of all, the hubris of that goal, wow, but in the director's cut, you get to see how that formulation came to be, the role that the church played and how he saw Cain and Abel in an S&M photograph. He saw the beauty in that life and he wanted us to see that beauty. And that drove everything,
Yeah.
So yeah, all of that was the motivating factor in me changing the story and the way that it was told. And the director's cut is really, you asked originally why do this revisit of it? It's not a revisit, it's the original film. It's the one that I shot. It's the film that I shot and edited. Finally here to share with you after all these years.
That was my question, I didn't know if that was the case or if this was a little time had gone by, the film came out and you sort of wanted to go back and
no
make some tweaks. No,
this was the cut that was going to play Sundance, that was invited to play Sundance in 2018. That didn't play for various reasons. And then by the time it played Tribeca, certain things had been edited out and certain, visual effects weren't in there and parts that I think are crucial to the telling of Robert Mapplethorpe's story. Just because of what I've said, because the church did play such a role and Patty played such a role. So there's a lot of those scenes that are in now that weren't in the more official release.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
yeah.
So even though this is it's a narrative fiction film and your previous work is documentary, I feel like this feels utterly of a piece with your body of work. I feel like one of the things I was thinking about this. You seem very drawn to people with very strong artistic visions, strong personalities, very clear point of view, whether it's Russell Brand or Josh Harris or Robert Mapplethorpe. You seem to gravitate to people who really, have a profound, strong point of view that might alienate some people, but who are driven to pursue that. And I mean, did that feel like a through line to you with what drew you to Mapplethorpe?
Yeah, I tend to want to tell the stories of what I call impossible visionaries, like people that take on the impossible, something that people can't really understand at the time. We don't know why they're acting that way and why they're doing this thing. And with Mapplethorpe, it was like, why are you so insistent on taking these photographs of men in bondage, naked with each other, and making people look at that? Like, why does that have to happen? It was not easy for people to grasp that at the time. And so he really fit in that, taking on the impossible over of my work. But also I call them impossible visionaries because they act impossibly. They have to withstand the doubt and ridicule of people that don't understand what they're doing at the time. Right. And so they have to be insistent and they have to be sure of their vision, and so they do things that are really questionable sometimes. And they often have even fatal flaws, like in the case of Mapplethorpe. And I couldn't believe that the foundation was supportive of this, but they did allow me to tell the truth about the fact that he knowingly spread AIDS. He knew he had AIDS and he continued to sleep with people. And that was something that, could alienate the entire audience, make people never, give to Mapplethorpe Foundation again, and all his work, which is dedicated, the foundation, a good portion, half of the foundation's, money goes towards elevating photography to be a major art form in museums. And the other half is for HIV and AIDS research and recovery. So, it's ironic, but to me, it was very important that we understand that even with this fatal flaw, which I have my own, ideas of why he did that, psychologically why, but even with that, he has incredible value. You know, he did incredible things, and you can't help but respect his drive and his talent. And he had a sweetness that it's up to me as the filmmaker to pull out. And I feel like with Anton and Dig, or with Bjorn Lundberg and Coolidge, or Russell Brand, or even Josh Harris and We Live in Public, you're seeing these characters, you know, even Jungletown, my TV series, Jimmy Stice in the Jungle, there's these really impossible visionary characters that by watching their story, hopefully it allows the audience to kind of grapple with their own feelings of things that they wish they took on, feelings of inadequacy, feelings that they can do it, feelings of being misunderstood, and then kind of arrive at this place of like, you know what? I should just go after that thing. I just want to inspire people to go for what they're thinking, you know, because you watch these people and it's kind of liberating that way, that even if they're flawed, they're doing this, you know? And so with Mapplethorpe, the difference was, the reason it had to be scripted is because he's dead. So all the films that I just mentioned that are documentaries are about people that are alive. Even Coming Clean, my new film about the opioid epidemic, is following people who are taking on the impossible for sure, but they're trying to recover from an epidemic that is, you know, taken more lives this year than COVID has. You know, that's how many people die of opioid overdoses all the time. But they're all alive. So I could follow their work over a few years, or I could follow their lives as they became sober. With Mapplethorpe, he was dead, and I wanted to bring him alive for you. You know, I felt like we want to see this man, and we want to see him grow up and have to like come of age and come into his sexuality and understand that true art is an unpeeling of the layers of ourselves, you know, and that's really what he was doing in the film.
Ondi, I wanted to go back to something you said, you touched on earlier, which is you're as a filmmaker, you're a visual storyteller, and you're making a film about another visual artist. And I'm just really curious, like how that, as you were working on the film, how did you grapple with that? You know, your approach to your subject compared to his approach to his subjects, and how you were framing that.
That's a great question, and absolutely was. You know, I knew my own cross to bear with this film was it better be as beautiful as a Mapplethorpe. There was no way to make a successful film about this subject without it rising to that visual level. So first off, I have to thank Steve Bellamy because I was actually a guest speaker. Ryan Coogler had to cancel it was Film Independence retreat in Palm Springs that actually had an impact on this film. Now, I just didn't even think of that till now, but I was in Jerusalem. I was in there was a retrospective of my work in Israel, and the phone rang, and I answered it. I think I was asleep, and it was you guys asking me if I would fill in for Ryan Coogler in the desert, like 2 days later or something. And I was just flying back to LA, and you basically picked me up from the airport essentially. And I went to Palm Springs to speak with Elvis Mitchell about my career. And I was at dinner afterwards, and I sat next to Steve Bellamy, who I'd never met in my life, president of Kodak. And he said, it would be an absolute travesty, a crime. I think he said a crime against humanity. It was something major. If you know Steve, it was like over the top. If you don't shoot this on film. And I said, well, I'd love to, but you know, now you've got to help me make that happen. And it's like the film that we shot Super 16, and then I shot a lot of Super 8, right? I kept a Super 8 camera, which I shoot in all my movies, almost all my movies. I kept it on my director's chair, and in between takes, I would shoot Super 8. So all those shots of like Sandy and Patty dancing outside, or, you know, and the director's cut has like 3 times the amount of Super 8 of the official release. So you can enjoy all that knowing that I was basically just trying to get peanut butter for the bread, you know, because I was like, there is no way in 19 days to shoot this script. I'm going to figure out some cheats here, you know. One of them is going to be, let me ship in like 15 rolls of Super 8 and just shoot it. And then we got Nancy Schreiber, who's, you know, a goddess of the light and an incredible DP. She had shot lots of film over her career, but none of her films had a solid aesthetic from beginning to end. And I thought, this woman deserves this opportunity to just like go for you know, we're going to have like a super strict aesthetic here. And the aesthetic is everything's side lit or backlit, everything's silhouetted. There's going to be a palette for the early years. There's going to be a color palette for the middle. years with Sam Wagstaff and all of that. And then the 80s need to be cool and blue and silver and cold, you know? And so oh my God, wait, I'm forgetting names now. This is not good. I'll return to it. But anyway, Nancy nailed it. Nancy nailed it.
It's a gorgeous film, and I did want to bring up the fact that you shot on film. I mean, it's so beautiful. For anyone who hasn't, if anyone was watching this who hasn't seen the film, you have to go watch it. It's coming out April 2nd. It'll be on Hulu. It'll be on Canopy. Go online. You can find the director's cut come April 2nd. But the grain and the texture of this film is so beautiful, and the color palette. And it's not just nostalgia. It doesn't, it's period film. To me, the use of film, I just found it aesthetically so beautiful and inviting to the eye. It's not just about evoking the period. It's really like the skin tones and everything. It's just like,
yeah, it is really, I had so much fun coloring the director's cut. That's the other thing, is I didn't get to color the other film, the other release. And this time, thanks to the executive producer of the director's cut, I was, allowed to be in New York at Panavision Technicolor, and working on making the color exactly what it should be, what it was in my mind's eye. And it is really, really so beautiful and so gratifying to see how beautiful it is. And the 16 is really a character in the film. I mean, it's like, if I'd shot 35, it wouldn't have been as beautiful. It's really, it is this kind of pasty, it's almost like a fabric, it's textured, and it mixes so well with the Super 8. And I feel like, having Sandy Daly, who is one of his mentors, is one of his great mentors and supporters at the Chelsea Hotel, pull out the camera and give him that Polaroid, and then be in the director's cut, you see she's like shooting Super 8, kind of places the Super 8 in a context that it's them just shooting their own lives, which is a really nice feeling, and a kind of, diegetic. It's all really diegetic. And those Polaroid montages that we didn't have time for it, so wherever we were set up doing a scene, right after that scene, I would just like throw in characters and do like one of the Polaroid setups, but that's another thing that I think is really important to talk about, which is the photographs that are featured in the film. That was one of the most fun things for me as a writer director, was, okay, how can I take some of his photographs from his life when I was sitting there surrounded by the books on my couch for months? What's the story of the knife and the flower? Like, what's really the story behind that? Why did he do that? And then I got to think about, well, here are all the facts of his life and his relationship with his father, and the purity of his relationship with his father and his soul being that flower and the knife, and being able to put that in a, in a flow where his dad is discovering his S&M photography in the gallery, woven together as he's seeing these pictures. You're seeing Robert take that photograph, and you're seeing him as a boy when he first gets in trouble in the dark room, because he did actually take pictures back in the day, like when he was a child, and then he never took them again for a really long time.
Wow.
So, and his dad was a photographer, but the kind of photographer who took pictures of like family gatherings and everybody smile and sit there and there's the cake and everything's perfect. Right. So when I saw that picture of young Robert lying, and a true picture of him lying on his family's plot that said Maxie over his head, I thought, wait a second. He had a camera. He had a Brownie camera, like at the churchyard or at the cemetery. Like, what if he was taking pictures of the church, and then those pictures were discovered by his father? And they have a famous rift between them that I think is harder to understand in the official release than it is in this. You kind of understand it, and it all culminates in this scene with the knife and the flower, and so yeah, I just coming up with the stories behind his photographs, like even Father Stack, Father Stack, the priest who takes away his work at the beginning of the film, when he has that come to Jesus moment with him at the end of the film, asked to be photographed by Robert. And that was a really fun thing to film that you can see in both cuts. But it's, it was just really, I think, making a film about a famous artist. As an artist myself, I think the challenge not only was to make it look as beautiful, but to also understand his motivation and like down to every bit of it, and have the audience, because why else do you watch a biopic about an artist?
Right, right.
You know?
I want to ask about, so you're a producer. I want to ask you about being a producer. So you're, in addition to being the director and the screenwriter on this film, you have you're one of the editors on it, but you're also lead producer. And I want to ask you how important it is to you as a filmmaker to be, in addition to being the creative voice, to be the producer. And on this film, I don't know what the circumstances were with the original release and now the director's cut, but obviously there's something there in terms of, you know, who controls the film, who has final cut, all of that. And I just love to hear anything you'd want to share about how you see now the role of being a producer on your own work, and how important that is to you.
Well, it was very important from the beginning that I produced the film. And I tend to produce every film that I make, because it's a lot of it. Producing is a huge part of it. You know, how are you going to break this puzzle down? How's it going to be budgeted? What, you know, are we going to shoot film? Are we going to shoot video? Like, the director can say, I want film, but the producer has to actually make that happen on paper and make it possible. And so, yeah, I felt like all of the elements, I needed to be able to be part of that conversation. And I was, for the most part, but I did have to give up final cut at a certain point. And that, you know, is something that became a crucial element in why there's a director's cut now, I guess I'll say. You know, I didn't have, the final say to be able to include some of these scenes that we filmed that I wrote in the original script that I think are crucial to understanding his character. And so that was painful for me, and it didn't matter that I was a producer at that point. But I think producing is, you know, as a director, being with a great producer, someone who's, I think the best producers make it easy. They say, you know what, I got this. What's your vision? Okay, I'm going to bring these elements together. You focus on the day, focus on making the day with your actors, focus on your actors, focus on getting them to feel free and to be embodying their characters and challenging them to give different, you know, takes and all of that. So I was very much involved as a producer until those shoot days. And then really I was more, of course, the director at that point, you know. And I think I often look at films where the actor is the director. And I think, wow, that's got to be really challenging. Because as a director, being the producer, that was also very challenging. Like, I could help during lunch, but I couldn't really help producing during that, you know, during that period of time when I was shooting. Yeah.
Well, independent.
Do you have specific questions about the producing? I mean, I'm happy to talk about choices we made or anything like that. Like, we had to shoot it in New York. That had to happen. And that wasn't the easiest choice. You know, there were financial incentives elsewhere that might have made it easier. We did use the SAG minority provision, and we did manage to save some money that way and make it happen. But shooting 4 decades, it was 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s period in 19 days was extremely challenging. And I think that that's part of Matt's performance that you can feel on screen, is the tension of actually making the day, you know. Another thing that I thought was important was to film the end first, because he lost 20 stone, I guess it is, 20 pounds, 20 stone. I don't know.
Yeah.
Either 20 pounds or 20 stone. He lost a lot because he had to gain weight to play Prince Philip. So he showed up emaciated. And I wanted to make sure that he could eat. So we did the 3 days. We had 3 days to shoot the 80s in the loft. And we did those 3 days off the top, right off the top. And then he died on day 6 of shooting. So then after that, I was bringing him cookies and, you know, Levain Bakery chocolate chip cookies were like the key to Matt's heart. And that was helpful. And he started eating pasta again and things like that. So, but yeah, there's all kinds of stories I could tell you. Just ask whatever you want. And now I'm like, whoa, I'm remembering the whole director's.
Yeah. Were you able to shoot in the Chelsea Hotel? Is it like those?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So that's a great question. 2011, the Chelsea Hotel announced that they were going to close. And I checked into the hotel. There was a Dig fan at the front desk, where we live in Public Fan, upgraded me to the Mary J. Blige suite, whatever that is. So hilarious. I went and moved in for 2 days and photographed everything. Took pictures of the walls, took pictures of the doors, the hospital-like doors, took pictures of that incredible stairwell.
Yeah.
And then Jonah Markowitz, brilliant production designer. He and Nancy and I really formed an incredible triumvirate to make this film what it is, aesthetically. He's so great with locations, and he found finally the stairwell. I was like, look, I just need the stairwell. Like, just find me the stairwell, and then we'll just build around that, and then we can just do anything anywhere. And he found a place in Yonkers that had that stairwell. And that was, to me, that spoke to the lobby of the Chelsea Hotel more than anything. Yeah. And then from there, we had to do some visual effects and stuff, because we ended up shooting the Chelsea Hotel, his dorm in Pratt, like his apartment in Brooklyn where he first met and stayed with Patty, the garden and the gazebo scene, the S&M, crazy S&M shoot took place in 7 minutes in the back in an empty pool in that same location in Yonkers. So the beginning of the film shoot, we had 3 days in that loft, and the end of the film shoot, we were in Yonkers till like day 15, 16, and 17. And wow, did we have to bang out many different periods. And Matt was just such a great sport, putting on different wigs. And
That's
yeah, there was so little time left for that S&M shoot, and all the extras were there in their S&M and everything. There was so little time left that I had to go with the Steadicam operator, Sandy, through there and just be his point of view while he quickly changed. And then we did one take of him actually walking through the pool, taking the photographs. And that was it. There were a couple of things that when I watched the film, which I refreshed on this morning, to be able to talk to you, I was like, oh my God, and this shoot, like art gallery day, every art gallery had to be filmed in one day. Yeah.
I mean, I had no idea this year you had 19 days. That's crazy. I mean, you're shooting 4 decades in 19 days on film in New York. I mean, with a really sizable cast. I mean, he's the core of it, but like the
cast is incredible.
Yeah.
The cast is incredible. The acting in the film is just delightful to watch. I'm so lucky, Judy Henderson did a great job casting, and sometimes the limits of art are what make it great, not having time. I had to get my documentary hat really helped, like my editing hat of like cutting films all my life and knowing like, here's what I could do. Like the limo shot, for example, when Edward leaves him, there was all dialogue. There were 2 or 3 pages of script to cover there, but I didn't have any time. I had like 17 scenes that day or something. I had like 12 pages of the script to cover it was in that Yonkers location, which was just like multi-use. That's a really good way to go, by the way, is to find locations that you can pull out a bunch of different scenes, and not move. Company moves kill. As a producer, I can say that. So anyway, that scene, it ended up just being, he takes the camera, when Edward gives him his camera back, and he's sitting in the limo and he's like, you're not coming. And he just hands him his camera and pulls away. And you see Edward in the rear view. That was me ripping myself off. That's like the final scene in Dig, where Courtney drives away and you see Anton in the rear view. And Matt was like, can't you let me feel this? And I was like, I could, but I'm telling you, like, if you could just trust me on this one, just put your head against the window, so that I can see Edward in the background. I know it's mechanical, Matt, but you literally have to break up with Patty today. You have, Drummer Magazine. You have I laid out like all of the things, like you have so many scenes today that are very, very emotional. They're going to take a while. Oh, he had to hook up with David Crowland in that same hotel room at the Chelsea Hotel room, all of that, So he did it. He laid his head against the window. He wasn't happy with me for that, but we got through it. So yeah, just getting through those 19 days was really challenging and really stressful on everybody. And I definitely think we could have used a few more days there, but we did it, somehow we pulled it off.
Well, Ondi, I care about independent film because it's where you get, unfiltered original voices. Like you go to independent film for a director's vision. So I'm so happy that the director's cut is now out. And, without knowing any of the backstory of how that plays out with different producers and financiers, it's fantastic that this version is now in the world.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I should say it's really thanks to a woman who named Jamie Wolf, and Geraldine Dreyfus, whose name you probably know,
Sure.
who just really loved my cut, and really just thought it really told the story of Mapplethorpe. And that, and I think she really persevered on this and making this possible because she was, she felt like the memory of Mapplethorpe deserved it, like that she wanted to make sure he had the film that represented him the most, that really told his story, that existed in the world somehow. And she was relentless. She really worked on that for a long time. There were times, Josh, and I know you know me to be a very tenacious filmmaker, and I am, but there were times that I gave up. It wasn't like I was just running with the sword, these last few years to get this cut out into the world. I, of course, participated, but it was really Jamie who felt this had to happen, and I'm very grateful now that we all get to see it and share in it, and that Robert does have this film. I did a couple of times feel him in the process of writing the film. I felt his blessing, even when I put in the dark stuff, even when I put in the truthful stuff. I felt like he really liked what I was doing. So, and so I'm glad that it gets to be out there in all of its nuances,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the other cut, by the way. Like, it won like 9 audience awards all over the place, and it's a wonderful, moving piece. But even the death in the director's cut is a completely different experience than the death in the other cut. Because in my view of death, and thinking about my own mortality as a writer when I'm writing this, I was thinking about, what is he thinking about on his deathbed? How, if you're a person who framed up your life and everything outside that frame that was imperfect had to go, like, for example, he's in the pool, he's shooting the S&M, he's shooting, Men in Leather, he's shooting a GIMP in full leather. That's a famous photograph of his. So I thought, let me stage it in that pool scene. But you have all this riffraff around, you have all these other people in the shot, and he's on a Polaroid because he's a young photographer. He has not become Robert Mapplethorpe that we know yet. And on his way home, he has a vision. If I cleared out all the people around the GIMP and I put him, and I made it a formalist painting, I made it like a bust. I made it something that was so sculptural that it was like a Rodin or a Michelangelo. And if I do that, and I clear away everything else, and I bring this GIMP into the studio, and I just shoot him, then maybe actually people will come to collect this. Maybe people will understand. Even photography wasn't a collectible art form back then, so there was not even, he was like, had a double mission of like, photographs should be collectible. And furthermore, all of this life that I've become so utterly fascinated by and attracted to, this should be out in the world, and this should be celebrated, and everyone should see the beauty. And so, in the director's cut, you see him have this vision on the way home of the GIMP, like it's on the wall, and he just sits and considers it for a second. Flash forward to his death, you've got a man here who has framed up his life to the point where his relationships and the loves in his life haven't been able to last because the art took precedence. The work had to happen, and the work was so particular, and life just couldn't measure up. Like, that was my interpretation of his struggle anyway, was that life isn't perfect. Relationships aren't perfect, and they didn't fit. So I wanted on his deathbed for him to relive his work. So I used 2 projectors on the wall. Also, we shot that in like 4 minutes. He's like lying in bed and he sees his work come. But I also wanted to see him return to being a child again, and return to that original photography that he did when he was 8 years old, and kind of make peace with that, and then visit his great loves. Because I think that's probably, and now witnessing the death of my own father, that is what happens. Like the death is like before you die, you have an emptying out that happens where like you kind of go through your life. And if you're lucky and you have a good death, you get to be able to actually like shed the shame and shed the regrets and kind of go through what you're left with is the love, you know? And for Robert, the love was dual. So the director's cut death scene to me is, you know, is something that I'm just, if it was nothing but that, Josh, it would have been worth a whole new release, you know?
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it makes me so happy. Yeah.
Well, Ondi, thank you so much. It's great to talk to you about the film. Again, for anyone watching, please go see Mapplethorpe, the director's cut, coming April 2nd. And then Ondi, your new film, Coming Clean, is that out now, or when is that coming out?
So that had a run. I think it's in theaters. Actually, people are going to see this weekend. So, right, they're seeing this conversation. And I think it's still at Lemley Cinema Online till April 1st, at least. They keep extending it, which is really nice. We haven't worked out the next chapter of it. I'm sure it'll be streaming somewhere that you can see it and available for download soon and all of that. But there'll be a gap in there. So if you can, go to Coming Clean at Lemley, Laemmle. If you're in LA, you know Lemley. Or if you go to comingcleanmovie.com or Coming Clean Film, you can still check it out. And I just love that film so much. It was life-changing for me to make Coming Clean. It was absolutely, yeah, to meet and to grow relationships with people that are so brave and so courageous, and to be able to take on such a dark subject and make it aesthetically beautiful. Again, that was the challenge for me with this, was can I actually show, you know, opioid people suffering from addiction in a way that we understand that we can be them too, that there is no, to break down the stigma, I needed to elevate it and make it beautiful. So there's a ton of animation, and again, Super 8 and Super 16 in the film, again, with Kodak's, you know, support. Yeah.
I'm so happy. I didn't know that story about Steve Bellamy at the festival retreat. That is so great to hear.
That man is just wonderful. He's a real lover of art and a supporter of filmmakers. And it was a crucial move. And he fought that fight with me straight on through. And
I'm so glad. I'm so glad.
My producing partners got on board with it too. Like everyone was just like, okay, we've got to prove that this is going to be financially viable and worth it. You know, and you know what the irony is, Josh? We didn't have the time to shoot it all. We had cans left over because the problem was we didn't have the time on the day. Yeah. So yeah, but the thing is, film makes you try. When film is rolling, everyone brings their A game. And not to say that you don't with an Alexa or something, but there's something just so finite and so special about it, you know, that it's really, it impacts the principal photography experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it gives you all kinds of like, especially Super 8 gives you like perfectly imperfect things that happen. Like I often open the back of the Super 8 to just blast it with light for a second. And it just gets this flash, you know, it just makes it ethereal, and it takes it to a level that I feel like Mapplethorpe's lived half his life with one foot in that world. You know, this normal world was frustrating to him. So, and I think the Super 8 helps you kind of come into his world a little bit more. So I could go on and on, but I know we have to wrap it up. So
Ondi,
thank
it's
you.
so great to talk to you. Thank you for being here. Congrats on both films, and I can't wait to see you in real life
Soon.
9 months soon. Yeah,
Really soon. It's vaccine time now. We're coming out of this. But it's great. Thank you, Josh, so much. It's great to see you, man.
Thanks, Ondi.
Okay, bye, everybody. Thanks, Film Independent.